A boat sits alone in the middle of a black lake. No moon, no shoreline in sight, just water on every side, and wind that has been rising for 4 hours straight. The men inside this boat are not tourists. They are not amateurs. They have fished this lake since they were boys, since before their fathers taught them to read. They know these waters the way you know the sound of your own front door closing. And tonight, that knowledge is doing nothing for them. Because tonight, something is walking toward them, on top of the water, in the dark. And in a few minutes, you're going to hear two words come out of that shape's mouth. Two words that will calm the whole boat down in an instant. Two words this same voice will say again and again and again over the next several years to people in the worst moments of their lives. Nobody counts how many times it happens. Not at first. But if you go looking, really looking, you will find that Jesus of Nazareth says some version of fear not to at least 7 different people or groups of people across the 4 Gospels, a grieving father, a boat full of drowning men, 3 friends face down on a mountain, 12 men about to be sent into a hostile world, a wider crowd of followers wondering if they'll have enough, 2 women standing in a graveyard at dawn, and a room full of friends the night before he dies. Here's what most people miss. It's never the same kind of fear twice. Each time, the terror is different, the stakes climb higher, and each time, he says it anyway. This is not a story about a comforting Bible verse you put on a coffee mug. This is not a story about a nice thing a nice teacher once said. This is not a story about positive thinking with a halo on it. This is a story about a pattern so consistent that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And by the end, you're going to understand exactly why it starts on a lake and exactly where it ends. Stay with me, because we haven't even gotten to the strangest part yet. Let's go back to that boat. The Sea of Galilee is not what you picture when you hear the word sea. It's a lake about 13 miles long, ringed by hills and valleys that act like funnels for wind. Ancient historians, including the Jewish writer Josephus, describe hundreds of working fishing boats on this lake in the 1st century. A real economy, real families, real risk. Storms here don't build slowly. They drop out of the hills with almost no warning in the middle of the afternoon or the dead of night and turn calm water into something that can kill a man in 20 minutes. Simon Peter knew this. James and John, the sons of a fisherman named Zebedee, knew this. These were not soft men. And yet Matthew's gospel tells you plainly what happened when they saw a figure walking toward their boat across the waves. They panicked. They screamed. They thought they were looking at a ghost. And the voice that answers them says something remarkable. In the Greek text, the word is tharsio, usually translated take heart, but it's closer to a battlefield command. It doesn't mean relax. It means be brave right now because of what you're about to learn. Take heart, it says, it is I. Do not be afraid. Peter, being Peter, doesn't just take heart. He asks to come out onto the water himself, and for a few steps he does, until he looks at the wind instead of the voice, and he starts to sink. You know that feeling, don't you? The moment your eyes leave the one thing hold you up and land on the thing trying to pull you under. That's not just a story about Peter. That's every single one of us on some water, on some night. But notice what didn't happen. Jesus didn't calm the storm before he said those 2 words. He said them into the middle of it. Fear not came first. The stillness came after. Here's the part nobody tells you. That wasn't even the first time he'd said it, and it wouldn't be close to the last. Because not long before that storm, on dry land, a father was already learning what those words could do to a man who thought he had nothing left. His name was Jairus. He wasn't a fisherman. He was a synagogue leader, a respected man. The kind of man other people came to for wisdom, not the other way around. But you can imagine what it does to a man's dignity when his 12-year-old daughter is dying. And dignity stops mattering at all. Jairus fell at Jesus' feet in front of a crowd, begged, pleaded. And while Jesus was still on his way to the house, the news arrived that every parent dreads. Messengers came and told Jairus his daughter was already dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore, they said. It's too late. Picture that sentence landing on him. It's too late. 4 words that end every kind of hope a father can have. You know what it is to wait for news and have it arrive as the worst possible version of itself. A phone call, a doctor's face, a message you read twice because you don't want it to be true the first time. Jesus heard it too. And he turned to Jairus and said 4 words in Greek that carry enormous weight for how simple they sound. Mi phobu, manon pistou. Do not be afraid. Only believe. Not, don't worry, it'll be fine. Not empty comfort. A command, paired with an instruction. Fear not and trust. And when they reached the house, the girl who the world had already called dead sat up and walked. Here's what most people miss about that story. Jesus didn't tell Jairus not to be afraid before the bad news came. He told him after. The fear not wasn't a shield against hearing hard things. It was what carried a man through the worst 4 words he'd ever heard, toward 12 more that changed everything. But it gets stranger. Because not every fear not in the Gospels is about a crisis that gets fixed. Some of them are about a crisis that's just beginning. Picture 12 men gathered in a room, about to be sent out into towns and villages, with no money, no backup plan, and a message that plenty of people would hate them for delivering. Jesus doesn't sugarcoat what's coming. He tells them plainly that they will be handed over to courts, flogged, dragged in front of governors and kings, not because something went wrong, but because that's what following him would cost. And then, in the middle of that warning, he says it again. Don't be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot touch the soul. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows, and not one of those sparrows falls to the ground without your Father knowing. This is not comfort about avoiding pain. This is comfort about surviving it. There's a difference, and it matters. Sometimes fear not means the danger will pass. Sometimes it means the danger is real, and you're loved through it anyway. Hold that thought, because the stakes are about to climb again. Later, after miracles, after growing crowds, after enemies start circling. Jesus turns to his followers, not just the 12, but the wider group who had left homes and jobs and families to follow him with no guaranteed income and no backup plan. And he calls them something almost tender. Little flock, do not be afraid. Little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. A flock is not a fortress. A flock is small and slow and easy prey, and it knows it. And yet he looks at this exposed, uncertain group of people and tells them the thing they're afraid of losing. Security, provision, a future has already been given to them by the very Father they thought they were risking everything to follow. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the story stops being gentle for a while. There's a mountain. You don't know its name for certain, but tradition places it near Mount Tabor or Mount Hermon, somewhere high above the Galilean plains. Jesus takes 3 of his closest friends, Peter, James, and John, up that mountain to pray. And while they're there, something happens that none of them have language for. His face changes. His clothes turn a white brighter than anything a person could bleach or dye. 2 figures appear beside him, long dead, Moses and Elijah, talking with him like old friends. And then a cloud covers them, and a voice comes out of it that isn't Jesus' voice at all. This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him. The 3 disciples do the only thing a human body knows how to do in front of something that size. They fall face down on the ground, terrified. And Jesus comes and touches them, a small, human physical gesture in the middle of something cosmic, and says 4 words, get up. Don't be afraid. Here's what's remarkable. This isn't fear of drowning or losing a child or facing a hostile crowd. This is the fear that comes from glimpsing something too large for a human mind to hold. The fear the Old Testament calls yar, a Hebrew word that means more than simple fright. It means standing in the presence of something so much bigger than you that your knees start shaking on their own without your permission. And even there, even in the presence of glory itself, the answer is the same 2 words it was on the water. Don't be afraid. There's one more thing you need to notice before we get to the ending. Every single time so far, Jesus has said these words to people who were afraid of something outside themselves: a storm, a death, persecution, poverty, glory too bright to look at. But there's one more kind of fear coming, and it's the kind you feel when you're about to lose the person saying the words to you. The night before he dies, Jesus sits at a table with the men who have followed him for years. He knows what's about to happen. He tells them plainly, "One of you will betray me. I'm going to be taken away, and you will be scattered like sheep without a shepherd." And into that room, heavy with a fear no storm could match, the fear of losing someone you love and not being able to stop it. He says, "Let not your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Not don't feel sad. He knows they will. He knows what's coming will crush them for 3 days. But he gives them this before the crushing starts, the way you might hand someone a lantern before sending them into a dark hallway, not to prevent the dark, but to walk through it with them. Now let's go back to that boat. Remember what I told you at the beginning, that this wasn't the last time this exact phrase would save someone in the dark, and it wasn't even the strangest time. This is where that thread finally gets pulled tight. 3 days after that table conversation, two women are walking toward a tomb in the gray light before sunrise. One is Mary Magdalene, a woman who years earlier had been delivered from 7 demons, who had followed Jesus not out of curiosity, but out of a debt she felt she could never repay. Beside her is another woman the gospel calls simply the other Mary, the mother of James, one of the disciples. They are not walking toward good news. They are walking toward a grave to finish burying a man they loved and watched die in public in agony, nailed to a piece of Roman wood. And when they arrive, the ground shakes. A guard of trained Roman soldiers, men paid specifically not to be afraid, collapse and lie there like dead men themselves. An angel, described as bright as lightning, sits on a stone that used to seal the tomb shut and says to the two terrified women, "Do not be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has been raised, just as he said." That alone would be enough for one morning. But it isn't the end of the sentence, because a few moments later, walking away from that tomb, the two women meet someone on the road, and it's him, Jesus himself, alive, standing in front of them. And the first words out of his mouth, the very first thing the risen Jesus says to another human being in the entire New Testament, are the same 2 words he said on the water, the same 2 words he said to a grieving father, the same 2 words he said to 3 men flat on their faces on a mountain, the same 2 words he said around a table the night before he died. Do not be afraid. Think about that for a second. If you were writing this story and you wanted one line to be the very first thing spoken by a man who had just walked out of death itself, what would you choose? Something triumphant, something about victory, about defeating the grave, about cosmic justice being served. He could have said anything in the world in that moment. He chose the same 2 words he always chose, because the miracle was never really about the storm or the mountain or even the empty tomb. The miracle was that every single time a person stood in front of something too big for them to survive on their own, the same voice showed up and said the same thing. This isn't the story about walking on water. This isn't the story about a mountain or a tomb or a locked room full of frightened men. This is a story about a promise that never once changed its wording, no matter how much the danger changed its shape. There's a modern way to feel the weight of this, and you've probably lived it yourself. Think of a parent sitting in a hospital waiting room at 3 in the morning, watching a set of double doors, waiting for someone in scrubs to walk through and say something, anything, that will either confirm the worst fear of their life or undo it completely. That specific stomach-hollowing wait for a door to open and a voice to speak. Every person in this script, Jairus, Peter, the disciples on the mountain, the women at the tomb, lived some version of that exact wait, and every single time, the voice that finally spoke said the same 2 words first. So here's what this means for you. First, the truth. Jesus said, "Fear not," in one form or another, to at least 7 different kinds of terrified people across the Gospels, and he never once changed the pattern. Grief, danger, glory, loss, death itself. The words stayed the same even when the fear didn't. Second, what it means for you personally. Whatever version of that boat you're in right now, whatever storm, whatever waiting room, whatever news you're bracing yourself to hear, you are not the first person to stand exactly where you're standing. Every fear you carry has already had those same 2 words spoken directly into it, by the same voice, on some lake, on some mountain, in some room, 2,000 years ago, and still today. Third, and this is the one I want you to sit with. He never once said, "Fear not," from a safe distance. He said it in the boat, in the storm, on the mountain, in the room the night before his own death, and standing outside his own tomb, having just walked out of it himself. He didn't remove himself from the danger before offering the comfort. He walked directly into it and stood next to the person who was afraid. That's not a phrase. That's a decision made over and over by someone who could have stayed distant and chose not to. Which of these 7 moments hit you the hardest? The storm, the mountain, the tomb, or something else entirely? Tell me below. I read everyone, because here's the last thing, and then we're done. Somewhere between a lake in Galilee and an empty tomb outside Jerusalem, 2 words got repeated so many times by the same voice in so many different kinds of darkness that they stopped being a phrase people said to comfort each other. They became a promise with a track record, and the record shows this. Every time he said it, he meant it, every single time.